Right now, we are on a path toward an implosion. If people lose confidence in the currency, then suddenly everything changes. If they lose confidence in the banking system, everything changes. And our society is so complex these days that we need the banking system to work. We need the financial system to work. The system requires that there be ever more currency being used to pay interest on the debt. We've got $93 trillion worth of debt, $20 trillion in existence. The reason that that imbalance exists, and it couldn't exist if we were using money. That's the thing. If we were using real money that took some sort of effort, and it was a physical thing that comes into existence that took effort to create, that was equal to the effort of something you're going to buy with it. If we used that, there couldn't be this imbalance of $93 trillion worth of debt and only $20 trillion in existence to pay that debt. So if they can come up with a central bank digital currency and get everybody on it, then you're trapped. If there is no other alternative, then at that point, they can do negative interest rate. The reason the taxes keep on going up is to be able to pay all of this interest that we have to borrow ourselves deeper and deeper and deeper into debt every year just to keep the game going. Because the currency that is created when you buy a house, or the currency that is created when the Federal Reserve buys something, all of that currency is eventually self-extinguishing. The currency that's used to buy a house, you borrow $1 million into existence when you sign a loan document. It's balance sheet accounting. The liabilities go into your checking account, you pay the seller, but then you work for 30 years and you pay that loan. And the first 15 years, you're paying mostly interest. The last 15 years, you're actually buying the house. But when you pay principal on that loan, the dollars that you use to pay the principal meet the debt on the balance sheet, and how much you owe goes down by a certain amount. And that amount is dollars that have vanished. So dollars are constantly created and then they vanish. Loans are made and paid and made and paid. And when you pay off a loan, the dollars that were created when that loan was made vanish. So again, this goes back to a store of value. How can a dollar that appears and then vanish store value? How is that possible? It's not. There's no country on earth that uses money currently. But it's interesting. The world's central banks all have gold on their balance sheets, and it's a tier 1 asset. Not all of them. Canada, for instance, has none. But it's a tier 1 asset, meaning that it is considered the safest, most secure, trustworthy asset. And the world's central banks are now buying record quantity. It signals that they're getting ready for something, but they're trying to draw this process out as long as possible. China is the world's largest gold producer. It's illegal to export gold from China. They are also the world's largest buyer of gold. So they're the largest producer and the largest importer of gold in the world. Why? Because they're getting ready for something. If the global monetary system starts to break down, the world, used to be connected by trade. All of the countries would experience recessions, within a few years of each other, and it was transmitted from one country to another through trade. Today, they're all connected through all of these derivatives and a financial system that operates at the speed of light. And so when one country sneezes, everybody catches a cold. And so wherever, it doesn't matter if this crisis starts in Brazil or if it looks like it already started here. We've had some very, very large bank failures already. And I believe that this is only the beginning. Senator John Kennedy, the current Senator John Kennedy, said on a mainstream media news outlet that the banking system is basically a Ponzi scheme. And if everybody shows up at once, it doesn't work. And you can make withdrawals on your iPhone now. You text message, this bank might be in trouble, get your currency out. Bank runs are real, and it shows the fraudulent nature of the monetary system. That's one of the things that it reveals. Every country that has engaged in quantitative easing has caused assets to go into a bubble. The Federal Reserve is handcuffed by the Federal Reserve Act. They can only create currency by buying certain types of assets. They've got to be guaranteed by the U.S. government as to principal and interest. And it says right in the Federal Reserve Act that they're allowed to buy U.S. treasuries in anticipation of future tax collection. It says it right there. It's got a whole bunch of legal mumbo jumbo between these things. But what I see is that, yes, it's the almost everything bubble. One of the things that when you look around and you say, well, what has been pushed into a bubble by this expansion of the currency supply? And it's real estate and stocks and bonds. It's financial assets. The low interest rates pushed real estate into a bubble. Now they've raised the rates. What I'm worried about, we are going into what I call the Bernanke bust. Most people have sort of forgotten about Ben Bernanke. There is one person that caused all of this. Now, the reason I wrote my first book is I read Ben Bernanke's paper, his speech from 2002 called Deflation, Making Sure It Doesn't Happen Here. And if you dissect it, you will see that he created a roadmap for everything that he would do in the future once we reach the zero bound. If you take interest rates down to zero and you can't go any lower, because when you go a certain percentage negative, people just start taking cash out of their accounts so that they can maintain their purchasing power. So there is a zero bound level when it comes to interest rates. In that speech, he talked about that the Fed is not out of options once they reach the zero bound. And he described quantitative easing in there. He said they could expand their menu of assets that they purchased to include things like mortgage-backed securities. Everything they did in 2008, there were like 10 things that it came, 7 out of 10 were actually done. The other 3, they have yet to be done, but they will be in the next crisis. But when they papered that over and did not allow the markets to continue crashing until they went to undervalued, the stock market, according to PE ratios, touched fair value, and then they, with QE, pushed it back into a bubble, and then Powell has pushed us into hyper bubbles. But this bust is all caused by Ben Bernanke's ideas being put into practice. 99.9% of the population does not understand how the monetary system works, but there's actually 2 forms of currency that the public uses. There's bank credit created by the banks, and low interest rates is what has created so much new currency that went into the real estate market. And then there is the currency in circulation that we use, but there's another form of base currency that is created by the Federal Reserve, and that's bank reserves. And that's a whole separate monetary system that the public never sees, uses, or touches.